In the last lecture, we looked at step 1 that the courts take in deciding damages or compensation for you. So the scenario that we have been looking at is that you had a contract with somebody, that contract was breached, you've gone to the court asking for compensation or damages as we call it in legal terms, and the court now is using these steps to decide if number 1, damages are to be given to you. That was the subject of our last lecture, the test of remoteness. And if yes, if damages are to be given to you, then how much, which is the subject of this lecture. So step 2 that the courts will employ is called measure of damages. How do the courts measure damages? Here, of course, we are assuming that the test of remoteness was satisfactorily undertaken. You were able to satisfy the court that either because the loss was natural or because you had informed the guilty party at the time of the contract that this is the kind of loss you would suffer. Either of those tests being satisfied, you are entitled to damages. Now the court has to decide how much. And the starting point when we are considering measure of damages is that the courts understand that parties get into a contract because they have expectations from each other. If you and I, we get into a contract, it would naturally be because I expected something from you and you expected something from me. Looking back at the example we used in one of our lectures where a student has a contract with the institution, there are expectations that they both have from each other. Student has gone to the institution and contracted with them because his expectation primarily is to get tuition. The institution's expectation from the student is basically the fee that the student would pay. And it is these expectations that bring them together and they get into a contract. Courts understand that. Courts understand that that's how contracts function. It's basically an exchange of expectations on the part of the parties. And courts also understand that contracts are defined as legally binding agreements, meaning they are agreements that the law considers are enforceable in law. And the courts would enforce them primarily because the courts consider that those 3 ingredients that we saw in our very early lectures, offered acceptance, intention to create legal relationship, and consideration, all exist, making this agreement into a legally binding agreement. So merging these 2 principles, that number 1, parties have expectations of each other, which they want fulfilled, and number 2, contracts are legally binding agreements, we get the picture that essentially these expectations must be fulfilled. So when 2 parties get into a contract, it should be the responsibility of the law, it should be the duty of the law, the aim of the law, to ensure that their expectations are met. And if one of the parties is deciding to back out of the contract, it should be the responsibility of the courts to ensure that the expectations of the innocent party are still met. One way or the other, the innocent party should still get what he bargained for. That is the basis of step 2, which is measure of damages. So when the courts are measuring the damages, when they are deciding on how much damages to award to you, they start off with the premise that the innocent party must be given his or her expectation. So the student that went to the institute for tuition, and let's suppose was not given the tuition, that student's expectation would be that that tuition would be provided to him one way or the other. If the tuition cannot be provided in the traditional sense, then it should be provided in some other sense, as long as the expectation of the student to receive that tuition is met, the institution has done its part. But if the student has not got its expectation, then it is the responsibility of the court to grant that expectation. To that end, there are different possibilities. So let's suppose the student did not get the tuition. The institution breached the contract, and they, even after they've taken the fee, they are now refusing to provide tuition. There are different things that the courts can do. one of the things the courts can do is to force the institution to provide tuition. That is to say, they can order the institution to ensure that a teacher delivers the lectures that he was supposed to deliver. This the courts don't like to do. Courts do not like forcing parties to perform, to make personal performances. Courts would not want to force a teacher to stand in the class and deliver a lecture. And this is primarily for two reasons. Even though that was the contract, even though the teacher or the institution had agreed to provide tuition, the courts would not want to force them to do so because of two reasons. Number one, this would amount to forced labor. It would amount to slavery. When you force somebody to do something against his will, that's slavery, which is against human rights. Of course, it's breach of contract, but then on the other hand, is enforcement of human rights as well. And human rights are more important than compensating someone for breach of contract. Secondly, even if we were to sidetrack the issue of slavery and in violation of human rights, forcing a teacher to teach, to deliver a lecture, is just not practically possible because a teacher cannot be asked to say what the court wants him to say. A teacher can be perhaps made to stand in the class, but for him to teach properly, that's not something that the courts can do. Nobody can ensure that. The teacher can just come and give a very defective performance. Because of the inability of the courts to ensure personal performance, courts don't get into that. They don't force people to make personal performances. So compensation really remains the only alternative. So a student, if he goes to the court and asks for an order to force the institution or the teacher to deliver a lecture, that's not going to happen. That order is not coming. But if the student goes to the court and says, well, because my institution refused to give me tuition, I went to this other institution and I got the same tuition from there. So tuition is not my problem, I've got the tuition already, but whereas I was supposed to pay X amount to my institution, I ended up paying X plus 5 to the new institution because for whatever reason the new institution charged me more. I'm out of pocket by that plus 5. I'm out of pocket by that extra amount that I had to pay to the new institution. So his claim would not be that tuition was not provided to him. Tuition he got from somewhere else. So in as much as his expectation is concerned, to the extent of the tuition, that expectation has been met. The only problem he has now is that he's saying my expectation has been met but at a cost of X plus 5. Whereas my original expectation with my original institution was that I would get the tuition for X. So this extra 5 I've had to suffer because my institution refused to fulfill its part of the contract. So he would be asking the court for that plus 5. And the approach that the court will take is court will grant him that plus 5. And the reason is very simple. The courts are there to give you your expectation. What was your original expectation when you got into the contract with the institution? Your expectation was that you would pay X amount and you would get the tuition. Now what has actually happened is that you have paid X plus 5 amount and you have got the tuition. So if we look at the difference in the two situations, what you originally expected to receive and what you have actually received, the difference is of plus 5. The rest is all the same. You got the same tuition, let's suppose, but you paid X plus 5. If your original institution can be asked to compensate you for that plus 5, the extra amount that you paid, that you were made to pay because of their breach, you'd be sorted. You'd get the tuition, you'd only lose X amount, which was what the original agreement was anyway. So the court would then order the institution to pay you plus 5. And once that plus 5 is paid to you, as I said, your expectations would be met. And that's how the courts adopt step 2, which is measure of damages. All they have to do to measure damages is to look at what was your original expectation and what have you actually got. And they look at the difference between the two and they ask the guilty party, the party that has breached the contract, because of which you did not get the expectation that you were originally meant to get. And the court simply orders the guilty party to make up that difference, to compensate the innocent party so that the difference is made up. This is called expectation interest basis. So the courts operate on an expectation interest basis. They look at the expectation interest and they give you that. Sometimes, however, it's just not possible to grant you your expectation. So there is a breach, you have suffered some harm, you want compensation, the courts accept that the compensation should be given to you because the test of remoteness is satisfied. It's just that when they ask you what is your expectation, what was your expectation when you got into the contract, if you're not able to prove to the court what your expectation was, you will not obviously get expectation interest basis compensation. So in the example that I just quoted, you were supposed to pay X amount to the institution, but you ended up paying X plus 5 to the new institution because the original institution was not giving you the tuition. This was a fairly straightforward scenario. X is a quantifiable amount, plus 5 is a quantifiable amount. It was very easy for the court to come to a conclusion that plus 5 is the compensation that is payable. But consider a case such as Anglia Television versus Reed, which is another English case. Here, Reed was an actor who was hired by Anglia Television to perform in one of the shows they were doing. And the expectation that Anglia Television had was that because Reed was an A-list celebrity, they were hoping that their show would be a success, it would break all records, there would be a lot of revenue that they would generate in terms of advertisement, in terms of other rights that they would have, etc., etc. So they hired Reed and they started their production of the show. At some point, Reed breached the contract and he refused to continue with the show. Anglia Television sued Reed. The problem, however, that Anglia Television had was they had certain expectations, no doubt, but they knew that if the court was to ask them what those expectations were, they could certainly tell the court, but they could not prove the expectation to the court. It's all very well to say that we hoped that our show would be a success, we hoped it would break all records, we hoped that we would make quite a lot of revenue, but quite a lot of revenue is not really a quantity, is not really a sum that can be ascertained with absolute certainty. Courts want evidence, and they want evidence with certainty. So if Anglia Television were to ask for those lost revenues, the court would not have given those lost revenues to them, because the court simply would have asked them that, look, we want to give you your expectation, we are obliged to give you your expectation, but first you need to prove your expectation to us. Tell us, these advertisements that you claim you would have gotten, what is the basis for this surety? And Anglia Television obviously had nothing to show that they definitely would have gotten those advertisements. Anglia Television had nothing to show that they definitely would have made so much revenue. So what happens then? What do the courts do when expectation is not certain? Do the courts just not give you compensation? No, they do. What happened in Anglia Television was that the court said, look, Anglia Television, you can't get your expectation lost because really your expectation is very vague, very speculative. We just are not satisfied that this is what you would have made. But we do realize that you have incurred some money, some expense out of pocket. You've spent money on Reed in reliance of the fact that he would be acting in your show. So therefore, you might have spent money on his costumes, you might have spent money on housing him in a hotel, the transportation costs perhaps, some marketing that you may have done. All that expense that you paid out of your own pocket, we are going to ask Reed to repay that amount to you. In other words, this is called reliance interest basis. So where expectation interest basis cannot be given because that expectation is not certain, courts grant you your out-of-pocket expenses by way of reliance interest basis. They just simply ask you, what is it, what expenses have you incurred so far, and then they ask the guilty party to compensate you for those expenses. This is basically pre-contract position, taking you to where you were when this contract had not existed. Okay, we'll stop here then.